But first, while Labor continues to revel in being back in power with that new ministry sworn in today, there was something out of the pitch of the new Liberal leader Peter Dutton that deserves a closer look. And that was his observations about big business.
I think the Liberal Party in recent years, frankly, has become quite estranged from big business. And I want to focus on small business. I want that to be the focus of our policies. I want to have strong policies, and we'll be talking more about that.
Now, this was really important, and it's part of what's driving some of the issues in our economy, like these skyrocketing energy prices. Traditionally, Labor's been the party of the unions, still is, and the Liberals have been regarded as the allies of big business. Despite declining union membership, now less than 10% of private sector workers belong to a union, Labor's still very much the political arm of the union movement. Unions have 50% of the delegates to state Labor conferences and often have block votes in pre-selections. As all the new Labor ministers were sworn in, it's worth remembering that trade union official was just about the most common occupation prior to them entering Parliament. And the one vested interest that Labor governments try to promote wherever they can and try never to offend, regardless of your interest, is the union movement. By contrast, it's now many years since the Liberal Party has had intimacy with the big end of town. That same intimacy, of course, that Labor still has with the ACTU and unions. In the 1960s, BHP was typically the Liberal Party's biggest single donor. Now, it had been many years since the big Australian made a significant donation to the Liberals, as it and most other large companies have been scared off by shareholder activists and industry super funds that use their large voting bloc inside companies to drive a left-wing agenda. As a result, very few public companies now make donations to political parties. Those that do invariably give equally to both sides. In the 1980s, big business and its main lobby group, the BCA, they were at the forefront of the argument for economic modernisation, for tax reform, workplace reform, privatisation and deregulation. These days, big business is happy to lobby Liberals in private, but invariably shies away from taking a public stand, even where the issues it should speak up on are in the company's best interest. Yet while silent on economic reform, they're more than willing to go public on matters of social reform. Same-sex marriage a few years back, you'll remember that, the perennial of climate change, and now this push for an Indigenous voice in the Constitution. It's hard to see how any of this adds to shareholder value or improves the operating environment for business, but it sure panders to the ESG crowd of activist shareholders. And it might make young, woke staff perhaps feel more comfortable with capitalism. That's why Peter Dutton said what he did. Of course, there are still some business leaders who are prepared to be brave in public, like Stuart Kirk, the head of the so-called responsible investing area at HSBC Bank, who's just told the Financial Times that climate change was, quote, not a financial risk that we need to worry about.
The more people say the world is going to end, and here I've looked at the number of incidences in all press around the world that use climate catastrophe, the number of times the phrase climate catastrophe is mentioned around the world, the higher and higher and higher risk assets go, in tandem. The more we're doomed, the higher prices go. How is that possible? So what's going on then? The Sharons and the Mark Carneys of this world need to tell us why prices are going up with our own demise.
It says everything about our Orwellian world that as quickly as he spoke up, he was suspended for what he said. Then there's Elon Musk, who can't be sacked because he part owns the company, who declared that the whole ESG movement was a scam. Now, what's ESG? It's the newish corporate obsession with a company's environment, social and governance impacts that some now weigh as seriously as whether a company turns a profit. A scam, says Musk, and it's been, he says, quote, weaponised by phony social justice warriors to bully business into being compliant with the leftist agenda. Now, I wonder how many teal types after that want to torch their Teslas, but this is exactly why Dutton was right this week to insist that it was small business that would be the renewed focus of the Liberal Party. It's not that the Liberal Party has changed. Its job's always been to support Main Street over Wall Street. It's big business that's changed, and changed for the worse. The capitalists who no longer believe in capitalism, who are happy to pocket, of course, their big salaries, but not defend the freedoms that make markets work. Rich executives and board directors too that fail to honour the traditional responsibilities of business to its workers, customers and shareholders. The last Liberal leader who lost his way here, pandering to the big end of town, was, of course, Malcolm Turnbull. Dutton won't make this mistake, but as the Liberals keep trying to find their way back, the Labor Party's full steam ahead with Anthony Albanese, quite rightly declaring yesterday that they will not waste a minute of their time in government. No, no, Labor never waste their time in government. But sadly, the Liberal Party just did.